Hey everybody, thank you for joining us once again for the Mantle Ministries podcast. Brother Wilson, thank you for joining the podcast today.
Man, I'm delighted to be a part of this, Brother Griffiths. Thank you so much.
That feels weird, Brother Griffiths. You know, I make my daughter call me Brother Griffiths now. I've ascended into that ministerial ranks. My
Okay.
3-year-old.
So what do you want to be called?
Brother Griffiths feels good. That's
Superman.
right. That's right. Hey, I'll tell you a funny story. So, my middle name's Gregory, and people can't say Merritt at Starbucks. So I just got tired of people calling me Marriott or Mary, or I just couldn't handle it.
Oh my.
So I just started using Greg. It's my middle name. It works out.
Great.
Yeah. Well, one time my wife took a picture with my daughter holding my Starbucks cup, and she's drinking it. My daughter is, and it says Greg.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize that Instagram and Facebook was going to explode because they're like, "Who is Greg? Who are you and your daughter out with?" It started a scandal over this coffee cup and this middle name thing. So, yeah, there you go. You know. So, Greg, if you see a Greg in
I
my
hear
house
you.
or anywhere, that's me.
That's you.
Yeah.
There you go. Merritt, Greg, Griffiths,
Yeah,
MGG.
we didn't think about how that would sound phonetically. They just did it. It doesn't have that good of a rhyme, but whatever, worked out.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
works.
we were joking about
It works.
your fandom, your Indiana fandom. Do you want to share who you root for, and we just turn off half the audience at the
Oh
start?
yes. That would be Notre Dame.
Yeah,
It would be Notre
it's
Dame.
classy.
So kind of funny story. Lou Holtz was the coach of Notre Dame years ago,
Yeah.
football. And they played Miami, and Jimmy Johnson was the coach. And the statement was made. I'm a little
Hmm.
kid, but the statement was, I don't. Jimmy Johnson says, I don't think that Jesus cares who's going to win this game. And Lou Holtz replied, well, you're probably right, but his mother Mary does. And so it was Notre Dame is a Catholic
That's
school.
right.
But what the deal there is that my dad pastored in Indiana, multiple places, and for 5 years we pastored right across the line into Niles,
Hmm.
Michigan. And so my uncle, my dad's twin brother, pastored in Mishawaka, or about basically South Bend, and he happened to live right south of the campus. So every week we would drive through the campus to go see my uncle and have dinner together. And so I'm 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I'm driving right through the campus in Notre Dame. It's the first college I remember as a kid,
Hmm.
all these things. So it had a huge impression. At the time, I liked sports a lot.
Hmm.
And so my dad would actually get up and preach that, you need to be reading your Bible before you read the sports
Hmm.
page, and you need to love Jesus before you do sports. But, as a kid, I really liked it. Now, I still like some of it, but not like I did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I knew everybody's, I was an IU basketball fan. I knew everybody who played. I knew their names. I knew their field goal average. I mean, the list goes
Yeah.
on and on. I was a sports fanatic. So now I'm just a Jesus fanatic, a leadership fanatic, my family,
Yeah.
and I love to fly fish.
Okay, fly. This
But I
must be a
still root for
common
Notre
theme
Dame.
for the anointed. You're the second person
Come on now.
about fly fishing. So actually, the third. So I don't want to. So I went to
Really?
IBC. I know that makes us in a weird setting here. I went to Indiana Bible College for a year.
Don't
You
tell
know,
me. I know what you're getting ready to say.
yeah,
Jason
yes,
Gallion.
fly fishing.
Yeah, I taught him how to
That's what it
fly
was.
fish.
Okay, okay.
Yes. I'm the
Of the
master.
fly.
He's my pupil.
That's so funny. Is it the scenic?
I don't know if well, you and I don't think we've had these conversations because we're just getting to know
Yeah.
each other, but Jason Gallion, when he left IVC as a student, he went to Gerald, Indiana, and he was a youth
Uh huh.
pastor. The youth pastor for my father-in-law, Sidney
Oh
Young.
my goodness.
And so I walk into a remodel that they're doing in a little kitchen in the old tabernacle. And I walk into the remodel, and within like 60 seconds, I find out that he likes fly fishing. I had just started pastoring in East Tennessee. It's fly fishing
Hmm.
everywhere. So I invited him down, and he came down and went fly fishing together. When he was youth president of Alaska, I went to Alaska several times and fly fished. In fact, the picture behind me is a chalk drawing of me standing in the Kenai River. That's 2004. And Jason Gallion took the photo.
That is
And
crazy.
so we took it to a lady. She made a chalk drawing out of the picture. And so my kids call him Uncle Jason and Aunt Stephanie. Their kids call us Uncle Eugene and Aunt Carrie. We've been on family vacations. I can't tell you how many times. So here's the true story. He may or may not tell you
Uh-huh.
this. Uh, when it comes to nymph fishing, which is fishing with a fly beneath the
Hmm.
surface and many times down closer to the rocks, He's the master. He will catch more fish than I do. I mean, he's just got the touch, and he learned that when he was in Alaska. He just picked up on a feel for it. But when it comes to dry fly fishing, which I maintain is the true art of fly fishing, that's the fly floating on top of the water,
Right.
and when you see the trout come up and take it, I will blow him away. I'm the master of dry fly fishing. So if you get into a deep conversation with this, it'll finally come out. But up front, both of us are maintaining that we're the best. But
Yeah.
I still maintain dry fly fishing because it's such an art. You got to be really good at it. But I'm still the
Yeah.
best. So we'll see.
We had
Anyway, yeah,
that's incredible. I'm glad I said nice things about him. I mean, I just almost,
I'm
I'm
telling you.
telling you what, I remember from IBC, there was fly fishing and that he loved the book of Deuteronomy. I remember that was the big takeaways. It was fly fishing and,
Yeah.
um, there must be a scenic, there must be, I think there's a connection, okay? And this is kind of tongue in cheek, but like when my prayer life is greatly blessed when I like have a nice candle, have a cup of coffee, just different plane, okay? And I hear these fly fishermen that are, in ministry. They are passionate about devotion. They, for all perception, seem to be well-rounded people. So I'm wondering if fly fishing is a theme. I wonder if scenic activity is just medicine for the soul and gets you closer to God. Something's going on with this.
Well, I can tell you this much for sure because my wife talks a lot about stress. And back this Saturday, we're doing this is our second or third year in a row where we're speaking at a
Mm-hmm.
conference. And the title of the session that we are doing, back by popular demand, they say,
Mm-hmm.
is how to manage stress without it managing
Mm-hmm.
you or destroying you. Or, this was on, but they say, and this is amazing, but just being out in nature, lower stress. But this is what's really crazy. Not only being out in nature, but just even looking at pictures of nature
Wow.
will lower stress. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife will walk in and she says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm watching a fly fishing YouTube video and lowering my stress." And I'm in Texas. I'm at Texas Bible College. I mean, there's not a whole lot of fly fishing in
Uh-huh.
Texas. The trout need a temperature that's a lot colder than what we have in the water here. So the closest for me is to go to Broken Bow, Oklahoma, about 3.5 hour trip, and I can fly fish out there for trout. But I used to live right next to it. I could walk out my house and be in the rivers in 10 minutes. And that was incredible. So I miss it. I miss it. But yeah, stress. So back in the day when I was pastor in East Tennessee, I had a lot of stress. And I carried my fly rod with me in my truck. It was a home missions church, and at least the size and operations like home
Yeah.
missions. I carried my fly rod with me in my truck. I had my own construction remodeling business. And when I would get done, I would stop by the river many days, not all the time, but many days and fish. And one particular season, we were extremely going through a lot. It's extremely stressed. And I probably fish 4 days a week. And when I say fish, it may be 1 hour a
Mm-hmm.
day, you know. And so anyway, we lived in the church at the
Oh.
time, and the river, the tail end of the former of the trophy section for the river, Watauga River, the tail end of the trophy section, I could be at that in 10 minutes. So within 20 minutes, I could walk out of the church, be at the river with my gear on, standing out in the river. And there were many times I would just watch a trout rise, taking a fly, and I'd figure out what fly he was eating. And I would make the cast, catch the trout, put it back in the water, and go back home. And my stress level just dropping and talking to the Lord, man, sermons, messages, and
Yeah.
I miss it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
I love it. But
I hate
anyway,
to,
that's not
that
what we're
I'm
talking
sure I
about.
probably made you a little emotional. I just brought up these, you're feeling the lack now of fly fishing in your life. What is it called? I don't even know. Brother Bobby Lewis, for those watching this that know him, he's an avid fly fisher, and he was telling me
Yeah, yeah. So you're gonna think I'm really crazy right
okay.
now, but I took Bobby Lewis on his first time to go fly
Are you
fishing.
serious? So you're like the
So,
godfather of
oh
fly
yeah,
fishing.
I was pastoring in East Tennessee, and he came into town to preach for me, and I said we're gonna go fly fishing. I just got into it. I was 31 years old, and so we're talking 26 years
Yeah.
ago. And I said, we're going to go out and fly fish. And he wanted to go to Walmart and buy his gear. And I said, man, you don't want to do that. I said, go buy nice stuff. And he's like, no, take me to Walmart. So we went to Walmart, went out to fish, and they had dumped, fish hatchery had dumped these fish into the river. And it just happened to be, we found the spot where they dumped them. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
know. Man, there was just a ton of fish in this pool, really small. And we stood there and over the course of 4 days caught like 250 something trout. And to catch those, we had to touch them. Now they're small. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, 10, 11 inches. And so after the first day, he said, man, he goes, what time does that fly shop close? And I told him, he says, we got to get there before it closes. He said, I got to buy some nice stuff. We went in, he spent like $600 just buying gear immediately. And of course, you keep that gear for a long
Oh,
time,
he showed me
so
his rig, and it was
yeah, it's,
beautiful.
it's crazy.
Yeah, he opened it up. He was
Oh, it was
showing me
amazing.
everything,
I
all
mean,
the flies he makes.
oh yeah,
I was impressed.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now he got into time. He actually taught me how to tie my first fly, but I wouldn't say that I tie flies. But when he couldn't fish for several years because missionary where he was
Yeah.
at, so he just got into the hobby of tying flies. So, but yeah, I was the guy into it,
I have this
So
vision, okay? We're going to start
yeah.
another podcast, and we're going to get Brother Guy and yourself and Brother Bobby Lewis, and I'm just going to set you up. You're just going to ramble about I think it'll be a great hit.
Oh,
Yeah.
it will be unbelievable fun for us and for the people who like fly
Yeah.
fishing. We will love it. Everyone else will be hating.
Yeah.
They'll hate
Yeah.
it, man.
Yeah. Very niche.
But the fly fishing world will go crazy over it. I just wrote a book that came out at General Conference on the 5 reasons churches thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And in that book, it's a fable. And in the book, I talk about this young pastor that connects with an older pastor, and the young pastor's got like 50 people. He's frustrated, been there. I don't remember how long I put in the book, 5, 6 years. And the older pastor is mentoring him, and then they end up going fly fishing together. And I'm describing this scene, and as I'm describing it, I can remember this is East Tennessee.
Wow.
This is East Tennessee, so it's crazy. So when I left the church I was pastoring, we didn't have a lot. We get to church up to 50, go back down to, 15, 20, back up, back down. And towards the end, we knew that God had put in our hearts to leave. And so we told the key leaders, and God began to move them away. And when by the time it's all said and done, there was like one family. There was a snowbird family, so you could say two. And anyway, Brother Lewis came in and actually took the church and was able to relaunch and get home mission
Wow.
status. And so we pastored the church that we used to live in for a while. And so we were there for almost 7 years, about 6.5, seven
That is
years.
wild.
And so the stories go on and on.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wild connection.
Yeah, I'm on it today. I had no idea. I mean, I'm telling you what, I'm sensitive to the spirit connecting names.
Come on
We,
now.
but
And it's the fellow behind us right
that is
here.
crazy. So Brother Lewis, Brother Sister Lewis, they've come for about a month at a time, the last like 2 or 3 Januaries. And which is funny, they stay in the evangelistic quarters, which me and my wife lived in for a year. So I know about living in the church. The scariest place at night is a church when the lights are off. I'm telling you what. It's the scariest place.
You can say that. You can say that
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
That is the truth, man. The little noises as the building contracts and whatever, the temperature change and oh man, it's like man, that's demonic. That's the
Oh, it's
spirit
so
right there
crazy.
that you're looking around.
Yeah. We used to, young couple, we were youth pastoring, and I was a little too cheap sometimes to go buy more K cups, and the Keurig was all the way down the hallway to the office area. And I was like, I get issues with me and coffee, okay? So it's like 11:30 at night, and I can't sleep with that cup of coffee. Caffeine helps me sleep. And I just remember the step of faith, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, like just to walk down the dark hallway to get to the Keurig.
Oh
And then you know how
man.
hard it is to take a hot cup of coffee and then run as fast as you can back to you. And I was a grown man, balancing a cup of coffee, running back into the. Anyways, yeah, that's funny. You know,
I hear
we're talking
you.
about. We'll get into the Elijahs of your life and all those things, but we got into stress as we spoke about before. Um, I think about this is on theme as well. Elijah rather, ups and downs. Jezebel's going to kill me. Lord, let me die. An angel comes down and feeds him. And I've had this experience with myself and with especially like hyphen members. They go on long fasts. They get really spiritual. They get isolated. They feel called of the Lord, and so they stop hanging out with godly friends. They get really spooky, and then life hits them and everything. And sometimes I'm like, hey, this man of God, Elijah, the Lord came down and fed him first. Okay, sometimes you just need to, you just need to eat a Snickers. You need to use practical. You need to take care of yourself. You're praying for
Yep.
better health. You're not working out. You're praying for peace, and you're not tending yourself well. And then I think about David encouraging himself in the Lord. Like the Lord didn't inundate him with magical peace in that moment. He had a little bit of self stewardship, right? He encouraged himself. So when I have no idea where you're going to go with this. So you can go anywhere you want with this. When it comes to stress and so on in ministry, are there principles of self stewardship that you think of? Is there certain a framework how you view stress when it comes to people that are trying to serve the Lord and balance their lives? Because we all deal with stress, some better than others. In some seasons, we're better at it than other seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So I've got like 1,000 things I want to say right
Hmm.
now, and so if you've got 3 hours, I'll
Go
tell you
ahead.
exactly
Yeah,
what
I'll
I'm
let you know when
thinking.
we've went.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's just like there's so
yeah.
much. There's so much to this, you know. I think one of the cool things is, and I teach this in spiritual disciplines, is that Paul, when he writes to Timothy, he says, train yourself unto
Mm,
godliness. I think it was John Ortenberg in The Life You've Always Wanted. It was the first time I read it. And he brought out the point that he doesn't say try to be godly. He says train
mm,
yourself. And so the difference between trying and training is huge.
yeah.
And I find that just in my own health, I'm always trying to lose a couple pounds, always trying to be healthy, but I hate training.
Hmm.
I mean, I ran 1 mile one time and it hurt. And I was like, I'm done. I'll never run again. And being a little exaggerating there a little bit, but still, the point is that we don't like
Hmm.
training, and yet Paul says, "Train yourself in godliness." And so I think that is a huge factor. The practical things that you're talking about right now is also huge. Is that sometimes our emotions um, they get to ups and downs, and how much sleep we've had, what we're eating, all those things are huge factors. I think probably the one that stood up to me the most was years ago. Dr. James Hughes, which was a mentor, spoken in my life and made a huge
Hmm.
impact. And my wife and I give him great honor. We spent a lot of time together. He would come to Memphis, and I was on staff, family pastor for 9 years. And I remember going to see a lady who was dying of cancer. And he walked in and began talking with her and asked her some questions. And she was seeing spirits, and then it was demonic stuff, and he was really going through it. And she's describing all this to him. And he said, I have a question for you. Have you been eating such and such? Starts asking him questions about her food. And she was like, what? And of course, every answer that she had was the wrong answer. Aida said, you do realize that the medicine that you're on right now and the chemo, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah, is depleting your body of such and such. And he said, and you need to take this medicine. And she didn't want to take her medicine, this particular type of medicine. He goes, you need to be taking that. He said, because it's going to balance that back out. He goes, once you take that for a couple of days and let's see how things are. So he comes back like 2 or 3 days later and there's no more
Mm,
spirits. Now, I'm not saying that there's not spirits because I 100% believe in, and he does
yeah.
too. But the point is that sometimes we're blaming the devil for things that is not really the devil. It really is the fact that she hadn't eaten, and she couldn't eat and she needed this medicine, and it wasn't like bad stuff. It was just replenishing what she didn't have, and everything just balanced out. And so I've seen other times with similar things with him, and so I learned a lot from that. And I find that in my own life, I mean, let's face it, most of us that are in the ministry would say that when we are at our lowest, when we are, emotionally, down or a little mood swings, and I'm not saying that we have those things a lot, but if we do, we have those moments. That usually is on a Monday. It's
It's
after
after.
it's after a
Oh
Sunday.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that you cannot live. I don't care who you are, and you could be an evangelist, but you can't live way up here all the time. You've got to come down. And so Elijah, he came
Hmm.
down. And it would be wrong for us to look at what happened with Elijah and start preaching at Elijah and telling him that he's worthless, that he needs a greater commitment
Hmm.
to God, that, you're just not committed. That would be wrong because God never did that to Elijah, and he's highly committed. The fact is that he's physically exhausted emotionally depleted, all those things. And so the word was eat and sleep. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to eat and sleep.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of us that take that, they were like, oh, I'm being spiritual and I'm just eating all the time and
Yeah.
sleeping all the time. Well, that's not what we're talking about
Yeah,
either.
yeah. A little sobriety help out. Yeah, for sure. You know, I was
Yeah.
thinking, um, I entered into full time ministry whenever COVID started. We had served before, but full time, started on the job, left my secular job like 2019, then March hit of 2020. It was just chaotic. And I was going through a lot, like we all were, okay? And, you know,
Yeah.
me and my family, we committed to this road, you know? And so I was like, listen, I'm praying the same, I'm fasting the same, I'm reading the word the same, and my sacrificial prayer time is as good as it's ever been. But the rest of my life, I'm just not the soil of my everyday isn't receiving the seed of my devotion. What's going on here? And the Lord began to deal with me about my nature, about how if I can have the right seed, but if I don't have the right nature, I'm shutting the door on His goodness when I leave my prayer closet. I'm getting everything I need, but I'm just not letting it follow me. He began to talk to me about self tending, and I began to be
Mm.
reminded every time Satan, Eve, here's this fruit, a practical gateway to a spiritual change. Satan tempts the Lord. Turn these stones into bread. A practical, you're hungry, turn these stones into bread. And I saw all the practical things. Dig these ditches and you'll receive the rain. All these practical gateways. I mean, even Paul said, present your bodies a living sacrifice. That's very practical. They're spiritual in the sense, but also don't live this way. Don't do this with your body. Don't drink this. It's a very practical thing to a spiritual alignment. And so I discovered something, and actually, Brother McKee kind of went off on this. I discovered reading. And it's funny. I love podcasts, listen to 3 hour podcasts, philosophy, a lot of scientific stuff, a lot of scientific journals. But I discovered reading like fiction, and my brain began to detox. Obviously, my I wasn't as inundated with
Yep.
media, but I felt like a rewiring. I felt that time stopped to dilute. Like the days felt longer. It freaked me out. I began to study more about it.
Yep.
But this very practical thing, I was storing up God's goodness in my prayer closet, but I needed a little practicality to let it flow into my actual whole life. Like reading, are you a reader? Do you find something like that or even similar
Yes.
that is it's not make or break in that it's not going to get you to heaven. It's not like, but it allows what you find in the Lord. It's a good gateway. You're saying sober or open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you said all that. I'm definitely a
Mm.
reader. And there have been times and seasons where I have read a tremendous amount. And then there's been other times and even years where I've looked at how many books I've read and I've been sorely disappointed in myself. And yet I stop and think about it. I go, wait a minute, I've been reading papers
Mm-hmm.
and articles and researching. So I never really stopped reading, but I like reading books. I love to have a book in my hand. Of course, I've got several hundred on my Kindle, but which is nice when you're
Oh yeah.
traveling, you're flying, but I love holding a book in my hand. But recently, and I'm 57, and recently I began to realize that I was at entering into a dangerous territory in my own life, and that everything that I do, I'm always giving.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I lead a Bible college. Then I served as executive pastor for several years. I traveled, I speak, I write. The list goes on and on. And I just feel like I'm just always pouring out. And it gets dangerous in where that you're always giving away and not taking enough in.
Yeah.
So I know that if I'm not reading, it's engaged for me to realize that, okay, I'm not doing well. I caught myself in that, I would do my devotions, but other than that, as far as reading, I'm not really reading like I need to be. And it started really bothering me. And so at the same time that's going on, I'm recognizing that my stress level's gone
Mm.
up. I'm busy and I'm trying to keep up with everything, and I've got a thousand things I need to do. And I can get up in the morning and wake up. I love getting up about 4:30, 4:45, and I can wake up that early and hit the ground running. And I mean, I can let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a dominant driver by nature. It's a hard behavior. If you do the disc, I would be what is called inspiring
Uh-huh.
influencer. But I've learned that if I'm going to get anything done, got to be disciplined. So now I'm an ID, and my D keeps rising, and so I'm like go go go, and I'm trying to read, but I'm getting like frustrated in reading. I'm like I'm not in connecting with
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm emotionally disengaged with it. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, and this is months of me fighting this, it's months. And all of a sudden it just dawned on me, and I went like, everything that I'm reading is like leadership books, or it is something like spiritual nature. And it just dawned on me, and I was like, I need more variety.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at the books I had sitting around. I had been buying books, not finishing reading them, read a chapter and just put it down and not pick it back up. And I'm talking 60, 70, 80 books I've done
Mm-hmm.
that with. And finally, I just looked at it, I said, okay, I want to take these five, and there were a variety of books. And I picked them up and I said, I'm going to read one chapter. That's all I'm going to do. And I read one chapter, and I went to another book, read a chapter, to another book, read a chapter. And all of a sudden, man, everything, it was like overnight, it just
Mm.
changed. It's my favorite thing to do is to get up in the mornings and I just go to those books, and I'm knocking out books left and right, and I don't even feel, I'm not trying, I don't have a number,
Right.
I'm not even keeping track of it. Um, but I don't know how many books I've read already this year, but that's what I'm doing. I'll read two or three, sometimes two, three, four, five chapters, go to the other book, totally different book.
Yeah.
And that little change, I've done it before, but I've done it before when I wasn't at the state that I was
Mm-hmm.
in. So I never really dawned on me the value of that. But when I got to the state that I was in, and then I did this, it was like eye-opening to
Mm.
me. Huge eye-opening. And then we're talking about a variety. I mean, fiction, fable, leadership, more of a church oriented. I'm reading The Flesh of God by J.T. Pugh again for I don't know how many times I've read
Mm.
it, but it's been a while rereading it. I'm loving every minute of it. So the list goes on. So I'm having a blast
Yeah.
reading right now.
I found that my study, I've always had an easier time studying. I think the most just I homeschooled. I survived that. I homeschooled myself basically. I did a Becca. If anybody out there knows what a Becca is,
Yes,
you just
absolutely. My mom and dad had Christian school.
yeah,
Yeah, they used to back
yeah.
a big part of it.
And I enjoyed getting up early. I'd get done with. I'd start like at 6, get done at 12. That was just kind of my nature. But I noticed a shift when I began to read in first thing in the morning. If I wake up before my devotionary time, word and prayer, and I blend them both. If I begin to read something that doesn't even seem that important, just it gears me up. My brain begins to rewire. I just feel like the cobwebs are being pulled off. I kind of feel like I've made a deal with myself. There's like the adult me, okay, that wants to get in God's word and the weighty things of life and be all that I can be for my family and my church. Then there's like this little kid in me that's like, it's the one that doesn't want to get up early. It's the one that doesn't want to be disciplined. And I've made a deal
Just
with
some,
those two people. And the adult me says, hey, I'll let you read this novel for 30 minutes to 45 minutes in the morning, a cup of coffee. I'll give you that if you agree to get out of bed and let me study the word. And I feel like that's the gateway to discipline for me. Maybe I'm crazy.
that's cool. Yeah,
You got to
yeah, I
make a
love
deal
it.
with both sides of you. Listen, I'll give you it. Don't go out and sin people. You know what I'm saying? Don't twist but you make a
Right,
deal with
right.
yourself. And that's been my deal. And it's helped so much.
I love it. I love it.
That's so
It
funny.
sounds good, man.
Yeah, it's working.
It
I've
sounds
kept
really
my
good.
hair and I mean I'm 48. I look pretty good. I've taken care of all that discipline.
Yeah,
That's funny.
you did well, man.
That's funny. Hey, let's talk about the Elijahs in your life. So Elijah is investing in Elisha. I think we always go to the point where someone's following the Elijah, someone's being faithful, the Joshua staying committed. But these men, the Moses and the Elijah, they have to be sensitive. And I think that it's not a given for us, right? When you and I hear the word speak in our lives, it takes a lot of sensitivity sometimes and faithfulness to follow and obey. That's the whole journey of our life, hearing it and obeying it, and the journey in between. And then we just assume, of course, Moses invested in Joshua. Of course, Elijah invested in Elisha. It's just a given. These men have emotions. They're real. They're living. And so it's a big deal they invested in somebody. So who were the Elijahs in your life? Maybe from afar, maybe someone whose book you read, maybe it was a pastor or a mentor, the people that kind of shaped you.
Yeah. So the first one would be my father.
Hmm.
He was my pastor all my life. So my dad is now 79. and stepped back into pastor because my brother resigned the church and went elsewhere. And so my dad is in another transition with the church. But my father-in-law was a huge factor, Simeon Young, and he was the first one. I was actually pastoring, and I wrote a letter and I sent it to him because I was writing a letter to that had some weight and it mattered. I want to make sure it was right. I sent it to my father-in-law and he read it and said, "Man, Eugene, you got a knack for writing. You ought to hone that." And I was
Mm.
shocked because I butchered the English language. I hated English, hated, still do. I got invited later to go sit on a panel discussion at General Conference in one of the seminars, and the panel discussion was on writing. And I'm in there with all these writers, and my father-in-law included. At the time, he was the editor of the Pentecostal Herald, which is now Pentecostal Life. So he was the editor for
Yeah.
10 years. He was editor of other magazines. He's just an incredible writer. And they asked, "What books have you read on writing?" And I said, "I do not. I've never read one. I don't own any, and I don't plan on reading any." I said, "I just write." And my father-in-law was a huge factor. I mean, a huge factor in helping me to write. I started writing for the Pentecostal Herald at the time, and he would not ask me because I was a son-in-law. So I was in a think tank, and someone said, "Eugene Wilson, I'll be writing an article." And my father-in-law said, "I think so." And we got in the car. He said, "I was waiting for someone else to ask." He said, "Because I would never ask you." And so that started a lot of my writing, and then eventually my doctorate, and then I wrote Realign and 70, and the list goes
Yeah.
on. And so he was a huge voice of my life. Dr. James Hughes, for which I've already mentioned, for years. We don't have as much contact now, even though we live pretty close to each other. But was a huge voice in my life, and I'd say was still is. I could call him up at any moment, and I have the utmost respect for him. I had several peers that also have really been like an iron sharpening iron type a relationship. Chester Mitchell, many years ago. Now, this is going way back in time, but I'm fresh out of Bible college by almost 3 years. And he came and preached at camp in Indiana. And I was going through a major transition and upheaval in my life. And he just came to preach the camp, and the Lord spoke to me. He said, "I'm going to speak to you tonight." And he was up speaking. My father was a presbyter, and I saw him lean over to my dad during the service. I had not met him or anything, and the Indiana Camp meeting, and it's packed out. And while he's preaching, he says, "Eugene Wilson, I want you to stand up."
Mm.
And I stood up. He said, he's one of our pastor's sons. And man, he began to speak. It's 1990. He said, "God has anointed you." Began to speak. And I just stood there and wept.
Mm.
And after that, he came to me. He says, I want to talk with you." And for the next, that was a Wednesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every night after service, he would just pour into me. And he said, I want to stay connected. And for the next 6 months to a year, maybe a year and a half, for a good while, he would call me every week. And then eventually it was a little less than that. And I said, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Because I was a young man like you." And he said, "And Lee Stokeen poured into me." And he said, "And I want to return that same thing. I want to pour into you." And man, he helped me walk through a season of my life that I'm forever grateful, you know. And so there's just been those times. And I hear people talk about, well, about mentors, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I have people even ask me, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" And and I get what they're saying, and I know that there is a desire, amongst us to have someone to pour into us and be a mentor for us. But for me, I never asked, and I'm not saying it's wrong to ask. I'm just saying I never
Mm-hmm.
did. And I didn't come from a big church. My dad didn't pastor a large church. I wasn't like a well-known person. Um, I mean, he was a presbyter, but the church was 35, 40, 50 people. But I wasn't really well known. And yet people just poured into me. And it was like a God thing, like a God ordained thing. And so uh, there's just something about those natural relationships. And sometimes they last for 6 months, and sometimes they last for 6 years.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if there's a lot that lasts for a super long time. You know, my dad was certainly one of those that's lasted for a long time, and my father-in-law. But you know, it's a cool thing, man. And then to turn around, be that for someone else now is really cool. And so I have that happening right
Mm-hmm.
now. It's fun. it's fun to be able to pour back in because that's what people did for me, you
Yeah.
know. So I could go on and on about it, but those are probably the main ones
Hmm.
who have spoken in my life that made a huge impact. There have been a few others through time that have impacted me, you
Yeah.
know, very, very deeply impacted me.
It's got to be, there's a theme that I've noticed, and I think younger, and I speak for my generation, I'm on the edge of millennials, and then, then most that we consider young now is Gen Z, 28 and down. And I think we try to make it very mechanical. Like, hey, will you mentor me? It's like this just transaction, but it's got to be very natural. Just because it's a spiritual
Yeah.
thing doesn't mean there's no like natural rules of human engagement. It helps if you like each other. It helps if you have a common interest, and
Yeah.
um, I think that like I had I had a moment, Brother Bachelor. He doesn't remember this probably. I asked him to come on the podcast. It's in your DM, Brother Bachelor. Just to remind you, and a couple KYCs. I think I had just come back from Bible school, 2015. Started youth pastoring, and I was single, and just figuring stuff out. And I came into KYC. KYC is Kentucky Youth Convention. I know everybody else says Holiday Youth Convention. And I sit down, and he's preaching. And I didn't, you don't. I'm not saying ask for this. I'm not saying you need this for God to move in your life. This is the only time this ever happened to this extent. And he stops in the middle of preaching Friday night and looks at me, points at me, and just starts reading my mail. It messed up his sermon. It wasn't. And I began to bawl and weep. And
Yeah.
I never want to crave those moments or need those moments, right? Because they're just not going to, when you need them or when you ask for them, they're not going to happen a lot of times. But when you're faithful and you're open, then the Lord will let it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it rocked my world. And I mean, that's 10 years ago. And you can live off of a powerful moment for a very, very long time if you're open to it. And it takes willing men like that, the Elijah of sorts, that, I mean, we never even spoke afterwards. I probably should have pursued it and just talked to him, say, hey, what? But it's just moments that change your life so much.
Yeah.
And then you got to be okay becoming that person for someone else. I was recently speaking to Pastor Luke Levine. Like, while we're waiting for someone to be our Moses, right? Someone to lead us to our promised land. I had to challenge myself. Can I become the person I'm praying to lead me? If they're not there yet, if that mentor's not there, can I start becoming the person I'm praying that I wish was in my life? Can I start filling that mold? Because if I can start becoming a Moses while I'm waiting for my Moses, I start leading someone else, not even realizing it. It keeps you honest. It keeps you not bitter. It keeps you
Yeah.
humble. Like, try, when we see a mold of someone we wish should come in our life, let's try to fill that mold. And God's going to bring them. But there's a reason why Elisha took on the mantle of Elijah. While he's waiting for that to fall, he's growing to that mold. Like, become the Moses while you wait, so
Yeah.
to speak. I know that was a rant, but I think
Yeah.
it's a thing that we have to remember.
No, that's good. No, that's good. And I think on a very practical, I'm extremely practical. Um, you said it well. This is a
Hmm.
relationship. I had someone here last year asked me, said, "Hey, you know, my pastor has got dementia, and I need a pastor in my life. Will you be my pastor?" And my reply was, "Let's build a relationship. Let's just see where God takes it."
Mm.
And since that point in time, we've been building that relationship. I went to preach for him. My wife went and spoke. Um, he's called and asked me for advice, and we've had some great conversations. But it just doesn't happen overnight. You build a relationship,
Yeah.
and on another practical thing, I think sometimes for younger guys is that don't be afraid to just to reach out,
Hmm.
text. Not that I'm something special. I don't mean it that way at all. But I can get to running and have so many things going on. But just a simple text message, hey, thinking about you. I'm praying for you. Something on those
Hmm.
lines. Or, hey, just wonder how you're doing. And all of a sudden it'll trigger and I'm like, okay, I don't have time right now, but in the next 2 days I'll call. And then there are other times where I immediately feel something. But
Yeah.
building a relationship is not a formal contract,
Yeah.
you
A
know,
blood pact.
like talk about Jason Gallion.
Yeah.
Jason Gallion called me like earlier today. He called me like 4 or 5 times yesterday. But then there are times we'll go 4 or 5 days and not talk to each other at
Hmm.
all. And so it's a relationship. It's friends, you know. And I think along the same kind of lines, This is you got to find personalities that work and all those kind of things. And I think another thing too is that, and again, this is not saying that I'm something special or anyone um, who is leading in front of us or walking the path, the journey farther out in front of us is something special. But man, guys are busy,
Yeah.
and so I've had at times had people who are younger like, man, I don't have any mentor like that, and but man, the people that they're asking on that, they got a lot on their plate, and so you have to. I hate saying take the crumbs from the
Yeah.
table, that fall from the
Uh-huh.
table, but sometimes it is. I mean, literally, I don't have time.
Yeah.
I'll catch you on my way to the airport, and I can talk for 15, 20 minutes. And other times it's not as bad. I'm not. Again, I hate saying that because it almost sounds like you're saying you're important, and that's not my point. I'm just saying that guys are busy. So I think sometimes I've talked to younger guys who get frustrated
Hmm.
because they feel like, man, I just can't. But stop and think about this.
Yeah.
I remember guys back in the church when I was in Memphis. I remember guys wanting the time with the pastor, and they would say things like, "Well, man, you get a lot of time with him because you're full time." And I'm thinking to myself, no, no. Actually, you had a lot more time, and this person over here who's going through divorce, and this person over here who's had an affair, this person over here who's, going through this and that. They've had a lot more time. I haven't had a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
I've had very little. Now, there's moments where there is more of an investment, but there were times, weeks and months on end, where there wasn't a whole lot, and it was just because the nature of it. So at some point in time, if I could be as bold as say this, there are some areas that you just need to pull your boots up
Yeah.
and dive into a good book, spend some time with the Lord, grow. And I think sometimes we are afraid of isolation, and we think that isolation is bad. The truth of the matter is that in isolation, God will find you like He did David,
Hmm.
like He did Moses. He'll find you. Elijah. Um, Elisha, I should say, didn't go looking. He was just out in
Yeah.
isolation in a
Yeah.
field,
Working.
and so just serve, be faithful, do what you're doing, and God knows where you're at. I'm sure this is not what you want to talk about, but I just feel led to say a couple of these things is that you don't have to network your way to the top. You don't have to get connected to the right person to get
Hmm.
somewhere. God knows where you're at. God will find you, and God will put the right people in your life at the right time that will help you.
Yeah.
And just be that kind of person who's being faithful with what God has entrusted in your hands.
Yeah.
And so I was faithful in 7 years in which I lived in the church for a couple of years, and there wasn't a whole lot of people coming to East Tennessee where I was at pouring into me. It didn't happen.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could look back on and see a couple little connections, but it was later that God moved me and began to pour into me. And then there came a season again where I was around people, but I was in isolation.
Yeah.
And so just be faithful with the journey, be faithful to your right walk with God. What was Anthony, the one, I call him, I forget his, Anthony the Great, who went out into the desert, and Constantine would send people to him. They said an oasis arose in the desert, and people came seeking his wisdom and knowledge and direction from all over the world. And here he was trying to get away from people.
They were.
He went to the
Well,
desert to get away,
even the
and they
Lord
found
did that. They kept chasing him for bread. He was praying. I
absolutely.
mean, so here we got into stress, and you can circle back if you feel free. I didn't plan on talking about this, but he's praying before that miracle happens. John the Baptist, his cousin, has died, and so the Lord retreats to go pray in the morning in a desert place, and then they've gathered, and he's okay, and he begins to teach, and he feeds. He goes back and prays. The reason why he's not on the boat right after this, when he walks on the water, is because he went back to pray. He's self-tending. There's pain, there's hurt,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
then he's
yeah.
feeding people. And like, I think that, I mean, if I turned, 5 loaves, and if bread just began to flow, as I'd feel hyped. Like that was my day. I'm successful that day. This was not the center of his day. His his his
No,
his prayer closet, his self-sustaining. That's what he was teaching us here. We miss that. Like we see the bread and the miracle, but we're missing like he's showing us how to deal with the ups and the downs.
Well said.
And glory falls from it. I mean, he's
Well
walking on
said.
water right after it because he's
Well said.
and I don't I get that he prayed as an example, but I think we minimize he was all God and all man. He took on the fullness of humanity. He's showing us how to get the power that's in him through the flesh he robed himself in. And he's saying, when I fill you with my spirit, this is how you get the power I filled you with through your humanity. You've got to self-tend, right? And then we'll worry about the bread and the walking on the water part.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna take that and use
Oh,
it.
there you go.
That's well.
That's so
That is
funny.
well
That's so
said,
funny.
man. It's so well said. It's just it's life. It's the balance of life, and
Hmm.
this is a side note, but I can't I refer to it often, and it's just so impactful. But Paul says in Ephesians that we're seated with him in heavenly places. He talks about Christ risen from the dead, seated in heavenly places. The powers, principalities, rulers of darkness, they're all beneath his feet in the heavenly places. And then he writes later in chapter 6, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. I'm like, man, which one
Yeah.
is it? Are they beneath our feet and we're seated with him, or are we resting? Of course, theologians would say it's the already not yet
Hmm.
phenomenon, that it's already done, but we're still living it. And I think it's so true in what you're saying is that, I mean, God knows where we're going. He sees the end from the beginning. He's already got it pegged down. He's got the path. We walk around kind of like the blind man, we've been touched, but we're still blind, and we're
Yeah.
we're trying to pull our way through. What's my purpose? Where am I going? What is God doing? And you never really truly, I don't think, totally get out of that.
Yeah.
I'm 57, and I'm experiencing it even right now. I mean, it's like, I know that I won't always be doing what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I mean, there will come a time, and so what does that look like, and how do you get there? And these are the questions I've been asking since I was 15, 16 years old when I began to follow after the Lord. And I think that a big part of that is just recognizing that God knows, He knows what He's doing.
Yeah.
There's a journey, and you just move down this journey. God brings people into your life, mentors, and He brings the Elijahs, He brings the Moses. He brings those kind of people into your life. There's moments, and then he moves and shapes it. And I left off one. I mean, my mentor back when I was in Memphis for 9 years poured into me, and I mean, when it comes to pure leadership, phenomenal, phenomenal leader. And I learned so much from him, and I gave him honor. And that was Pastor Terry Black.
Hmm.
And he preached conferences and calls at times. The list goes on and on. And he poured into me for 9 years, and I'm so very thankful. And so God has got people that flow
Yeah.
in and out of your life, and sometimes you bemoan the loss of relationships, and well, man, I wish that Dr. Hughes was around more, and I wish and the list goes on. And someday, God, I just know it's like my dad's not always going to be here, my father-in-law is not always going to be here. I know those times will come, and yet it's this ebb and flow of life. And I pour it into my son, and my son is 27, and he's starting to pour into me. I mean, he starts sharing with me things that he's studying, and he's working right now doing his formal presentation for to work on his PhD. He's finishing his Master's of
Hmm.
Divinity at Urshan, but he's already got a unofficial approval for his PhD at Aberdeen, and he's talking about things that's like out of my league, and yet he's pouring into me.
Yeah.
I'm catching little things. And the list goes on and on. And man, what a great journey. And so I just want to say, and I feel led to say this, whoever's listening right now, that you've been looking and hoping for something more and trying to find it, don't be discouraged. Don't when you're underneath a juniper tree like Elijah was, don't throw in the towel. Don't quit. If you feel like you're on the backside of the desert somewhere, you're living in the church type of
Yeah.
thing, and you feel like, man, there's no one around, and somehow get connected. If you don't have a lot of social media followers, and you don't have the thousands, and you see everyone, they actually, this is a medical term, Facebook depression.
Yeah.
It's actually a medical term nowadays. Facebook depression. Of course, the younger generation are like Facebook, and that's a dinosaur. But whatever it is, Instagram, the list goes on. I mean, don't get caught up in all of that.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying don't build. I understand the platform and all, but what I'm saying is don't attach your self-worth. Don't attach where God is taking you to your social media followers,
Yeah.
how many you got in your account. Don't do that. God will raise you up. God will bring you from the backside of the desert and put you in the forefront if that's what God is doing. If he sets up kings and kingdoms and takes kings and kingdoms down, don't you think he'll take care of you?
Right.
Don't you think he knows what he's doing and he will pull it together? And so, anyway, I'm on a soapbox right
No,
now. I
it's
just feel
good.
I feel led of the Lord to share
Yeah.
that. And man, you guys are going to do great. Your generation and the young ones coming up and the Bible college. I'm blown away by what I see. I mean, tremendous young men and women and are going to do great things. And to be a part of kind of holding on to the generation that is fading in front of me, and as they move on into um, eternity,
Yeah.
and they step to where we're all headed as they step off the scene and be that generation right now and reaching back and grabbing the hand of the younger ones, men that have a voice in their life and turn around and give back what's been given to me. Man, this is incredible, great journey.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, in the bigger spectrum of things, you're right there next to me. I mean, even though our age bracket, you're still right there next to me because time is flying, and you'll be here
Oh
tomorrow.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Um,
God's good.
yeah, amen. Amen. Yeah, time flies. I looked at both my kids. It's so funny. I know people are laughing because um, young compared to most. I looked at both my kids, and I was just had a little midlife kind of. The my paradigm began to shift a little bit. I was like, whoa. Just you add water, they grow.
Yeah.
They're talking, they're walking, they're paying their taxes. It's crazy. Like they grow
Yep.
so fast. And like someone was like, "Hey, you gonna send your kid to preschool?" I was like, "Man, I like to keep her around as long as I can. Like this is too much. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
overwhelming." Yeah, time is. I know you've been very gracious with your time. I like to. This is a pretty abrupt segue. People are gonna get, as I say, spiritual whiplash from the segue. But I like to ask you, like you mentioned before, a little bit how your day starts. How do we go? What does your kind of daily devotion look like? And how do we maybe walk us through into like preparation for ministry? Because sometimes they link. Sometimes people they just link naturally, or the people have an intentional system. How do you get your daily bread? You can even share like what kind of you use, a Cambridge wide margin. You can share the nitty gritty of it all. Just give people a
Yeah.
perspective, inspire some of those young bucks out there trying to dig it out.
Well, I'm probably not the poster child for what I would wish I was with things, but I've watched through life that there's been a journey. There have been the seasons of life where that it was a set
Hmm.
time, and I would go in to the church, and even when I lived there, and even when I didn't, I would go to church early, and I would spend a certain amount of time, and I would read X amount of chapters, and um, I did this back in Bible college where I fasted, and I even did this in high school. Fasted one day, and then I went to 2 days, and then eventually I was fasting 5 days a week, and this was eating supper only on a few of those days, and I would do this for, I mean, for months. Same thing in Bible college. I've been through those moments, read the Bible through many times, different versions. I've done all that, and then I've been through the seasons where that I found, as T.F. Tenney said years ago. He said, "I pray less at a specific amount of time, or at a specific time. So I pray less than I ever have." He said, "But I find myself praying more."
Hmm.
He was given credence to the fact that prayer had just become an ongoing conversation and communication with God, and it would happen throughout the. You would get in the elder's car, and all of a sudden hear them say, "I love you, Jesus,"
Yeah.
and you're just driving down the road, and out of
Freaks me
nowhere,
out. I feel
God,
super
you're so
carnal when
good.
they do it. Like, thank you, Jesus. I'm like, wait a second. That's
Well,
a little too fast for
yeah,
me. I need a boot up.
I think I think I'm becoming an old man. I catch myself doing those things nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, I way from the house to the school today, and I just said, "Thank you, Lord." And I catch myself doing that. So I think that it has evolved away from it being more of a formal structure to really a relationship. So do I still do devotions? Yes. You look at my calendar right now. It's at 5 o'clock every morning. And sometimes I'll move it to 4:30. and that's my time. And I've got a list of notes and things that I work with. I've got a lot of Bible apps that I love. I use Bible
Mm-hmm.
Gateway, and I've got tons of stuff in it. I get the paid version. I love it. I've read the Bible through using Bible Gateway. I've got highlights and all kinds of different versions. I found a lot for me when I was going into Asia and going places that I felt like it would be a lot safer me not be carrying around a
Mm-hmm.
Bible. I started using electronic version and started doing a lot of that. And I still find myself doing that. One, my handwriting is horrible. I'm not exaggerating. If when I take down notes and I'm writing a piece of paper, it just goes from one side to the other. Turn a page, it could be handwritten all over it. And if I don't sit down within 24 hours and type out what I really want to capture, give me 3 or 4 days, I won't be able to tell you because I can't even read my handwriting. It's horrible. And so I've gotten into where I type. And now my kids, thank God, they're different. They're like, no, you can retain better, better memory if you handwrite.
Mm-hmm.
And man, they've got journals, and I'm envious. I'm so envious. And I used to. When I was their age, I did. But the older I got, I can type fast and I can write, I can read it, and I can save it. So I do a lot of that. I have my books that I read, like The Flesh of God. I'm really loving that book. I've got several books that I read that are uh, devotion oriented, and that I'm not trying to read right through the book. I'm taking my time, very methodically working my way through. I've gotten into where I really love and enjoy studying books and the
Mm-hmm.
Bible. So I've done this for several years now, where I will go and I will read like the book of Ephesians, and I spent like 5 years at one time devouring the book of Ephesians. Just on the side, as part of my devotions and ongoing growth, I did the book of Philippians last year, and I probably did 6 months. I can't tell you how many times I reread the book of Philippians and all the commentaries and all the extra things I would tear into it. And this is just part of my devotions. I wasn't studying for a sermon. Now God gave me messages, but I didn't go to the book of Philippians to get a
Yeah.
message. I was there studying. One day I said, God, can I read something different? I just feel like I need to read something different. And I felt led, started reading First Corinthians. And man, God began speaking to me from First Corinthians. So I love doing that. So that's a little bit of what I do. But then spiritual disciplines goes beyond just Bible reading, goes beyond um, the things that we think of, Bible reading, prayer, fasting. It goes beyond all that,
Yeah.
journaling. There's a lot of people that believe that that's a spiritual discipline. I can tell you my own personal story where the Lord told me in a dream to back things up by writing it down. And so I do that, but not in a formal sense of journaling. I do that by the books that I write and the things that I'm working on. And I will write things down. I'll make a note and then I'll go back and I capture it and I'll
Yeah.
develop it out further. And so I'm always writing. I think it's a big and important part for life. Braden Anderson, Dr. Braden Anderson does a deal on spiritual disciplines of evangelism, and it put me to shame. I mean, it is incredible how he disciplines himself with the personal evangelism. And yet, I have that element in my life, just not to the extent of his. And so I could go on and on, but those are just a little bit of some of the insights. I think the big deal there again is that not trying, but rather training
Mm-hmm.
is important. And at the same time, also developing that where it's just a love. It's almost like eating a bag of Doritos. You eat one Dorito, you can't
Yeah.
eat
Nobody
just one
goal
Dorito,
sets
man.
for Doritos. I'm gonna get through 5 chips today. You just kind of lose yourself in it. You know.
You're gonna eat a whole bag. You start it. I mean, it's like me with I love sweets, man. I'm eating those little nerds with um I can't even think of what it's called right now. Yeah, nerd candy that's on the little gummy with a nerd around it. And those things are addictive. I eat one and I eat like a handful, and then I get another handful, another handful. Next thing I know, I'm feeling sick because I had too much
Yeah.
sugar. And but it's like with the Lord is that if you're struggling, get started. Do something small,
Right.
grow in it, and it starts grabbing a hold of you. And the next thing you know, you're just devouring it. And so I had breaks today. I say breaks. I had a couple moments where I had some free time, and immediately just went into some things that I'm studying that I felt drawn to it. The Word of God, and man, there ain't nothing like the Word of God.
Yeah.
There's nothing like. And so I could go on. Sorry,
I
I'm not sure I
no, that
answered
was
everything you
perfect. That
were
was all
looking for.
great. I I'm noticing a theme, and this is something the language that I've used. I know it's cliche, but if I ever went to go look for something, like I need a sermon. There's times that it's happened, but I just can't function. Some people are brilliant with that. They need a sermon, they go find a sermon. I've had to be more the process over product. I had to be more just kind of the flow, just repetition, and then I
Yep.
never have to stress about finding a gym because I'm always just getting myself in it for devotion, and it flows from there. So like it was for the longest time, it was one chapter a day, and I would read it and I'd pray about the gleanings I got. I'd make it my own little prayer prompt. I had like a prayer time that I call honest time, where I just pray, I ramble, I talk about deep things, small things, the weather. Then I'd have where I'd read one chapter and I'd pray about that chapter. And when I wasn't, you know, when I first started youth pastoring, I didn't preach behind a pulpit on a Sunday for like the first 4 years. I had Wednesdays with young people, and Friday nights every once in a while we'd have most Fridays were just like activities, ice skating, prayer meetings. Didn't have to teach, and I was struggling. And I was like, "You're struggling now. Imagine if you had to do this twice a week." Like, and I kind of had this weird let go where it's like, okay, stop trying and train. Just get lost in the process. Don't goal set, because you can always chase another goal, but you become a process. It becomes you. You change. You
Yes.
shift your
Yeah.
nature. You can use a goal and get rid of a goal. And I don't know if, and this is, I'm not saying like you were prefacing, and I'm just, young, but I'm saying that if anyone's out there that's in the same situation, similar situations, set a small goal and just, okay, I know I was going to let you go.
Yep.
We're about to dismiss service, but I'm
Oh, you're
rambling.
good.
I feel like before you build a house, you set the dimensions outward. Okay, the width. You go on the surface area. How big is this house? You set the stakes, and then you begin to dig a foundation. And I think we're so afraid of first when it comes to consistency, building the surface dimensions, and then go deeper from there. For instance, like in prayer, we want to go deep, but you got to be okay with saying, "I'm going to pray 15 minutes. Here's my the
Yeah.
stakes in the ground before I dig the basement." And if I can give that every day, then eventually depth will come. And if you can read one chapter
Yeah.
every day, then all of a sudden depth will come. And you'll never have to worry about finding a sermon or it'll flow from you. And I
Right.
think we just want to dig
Right.
deep because we
Right.
think that God and other people are going to judge. Nobody sees our prayer lives besides us and God. Like God wants this
Right.
to last. Like how would a young person pray tomorrow if they were never going to stop praying? They'd probably pray differently. They'd probably start smaller. Like how can I pray and study today where I don't have to miss 3 months because I got depressed about my prayer life? You get the dimensions and you go deep. And that's just,
Well, that's so good. And I could talk about this for a long time, and I have before for like an hour or more. And I keep talking about. I just met with South Central Texas youth guys, and I did this. I met with Texas. I did this. Did South Texas Spanish. Did this. Spoke at Wisconsin Midwinter Kent meeting 3 times. Did this all 3 times because they do regionals. Um, just did this for Harvest Bible College overseas. Um, did this at several churches, and did this at Urshan for their leadership thing. I mean, the list goes on. So I keep referring to this, and and so I'll do this in about 90
okay.
seconds. Dr. J. Robert Clinton did research back in the 80s and 90s, and he found that only 1/3 of church leaders finish well.
Mm,
His definition for finishing well meant that they did not derail and they did not grow stagnant or plateau.
mm,
Majority of people never make it to the fifth phase of growth. The fifth phase of growth, there's 6 phases. The fifth phase is convergence. Convergence is where your expertise, your experience, your knowledge, I mean, all these things, along with your passion, everything just comes together. And now everything is flowing out from you. You're doing,
mm-hmm.
but it's flowing from you and the person that you have become. The sixth and final phase is what is called afterglow. The afterglow would be the James Kilgore, the elders who've gone before us, that just had a lifetime of legacy. J. Robert Clinton's research said that the reason that most people, only one third ever are able to experience convergence. And so you have to get to convergence or the afterglow in order to finish
Mm.
well. Only one third ever get to convergence. And the reason is they never make it past stage 4. And stage 4 is where the shift takes place from doing to being.
Mm.
Up until that point in time, everything that you were doing in life, you experienced the formative years, you experienced the emerging leader years, you experienced the years where that you are actually it was formative, and then it's the inner growth years, and then it's the emerging leader years, and then the fourth phase is what's called life maturity. And so when you get to that fourth phase, God is shifting you away from all the things that you have focused on in order to get to where you're at now. And so you focus on abilities, you develop skill sets, you develop your personality, you develop character. All these things are natural things. But when you get to that fourth phase, all of a sudden God begins to tear you away from all the things that got you to where you're at right now. So that you can truly become dependent upon him, wholly dependent upon him. This is Moses,
Mm-hmm.
fully dependent on him. This is Joshua becoming fully dependent upon
Yeah.
him. This is Paul becoming fully dependent. And the list goes on and on. And so usually at those moments is where then you experience an incredible amount of crisis and struggle. And all of a sudden you are in isolation, and it's either I can't get there any further, God, based on my abilities. I can't get there any further based on my talents, my ability to make things happen. God, if anything's going to happen, it's got to be you. And when you get that place of full dependency on Him, now we have those moments. But I'm just saying it's a major life crisis. And I could go on and on about that. There's a lot of depth to it. But my point there being is that it goes back to what my dad started teaching me when I was a kid. Son, you can do, but focus on becoming.
Mm.
You're always going to do, but focus on becoming. And then my dad would say, son, he preached beyond his years. And he did not mean that as a compliment most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
He meant that as indictment against someone who had found a sermon on the internet or
Yeah.
took a sermon from someone else
Uh-huh.
who had preached it or got a seed thought because their skill and their
Mm-hmm.
ability to put together some things, and they can give a great presence in a pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
And he says they preach beyond their years. He said, because they haven't lived it.
Mm.
They haven't experienced the depth of what they're preaching about. And he would just remind me over and over again, you got to focus on
Mm.
becoming. And so I could go on and on, but I think what you're talking about, the subject matter that we're talking about, that this is it,
Yeah.
man. This is it. This is that becoming what God really wants us to become. And it's not easy. It's difficult. But man, when God gives you a dream, Joseph, just hold on.
Yeah.
And here's the cool thing about it. When it's all said and done, Joseph doesn't say, man, after all these years, after the pit, after Potiphar's household, after the prison we forgot about, God finally fulfilled the dream. No, he says, you meant it for harm. God meant it for good, for the saving of many.
Mm.
He doesn't even make any reference to the dream.
Mm.
And so what God is really, truly doing is so much bigger than what we could ever fathom.
Yeah.
But we have to stay with the process, and we have to truly become. So the doing will just flow from us. And so I agree. The practical, read the scripture not to get a sermon, but read it to become, to be conformed. The sermons will come.
Yeah.
I spend less time studying for a message than I ever have in my life. But I'm daily
Yeah.
devotions. I'm daily spending time with the Lord. I focus on becoming. The messages, they just
That's the
flow.
converge. Yeah.
And I'm not into preaching sermons, and I'm not against sermons at all. But that's just not what God's called me to do. I'm going to be a great minister,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a difference between the two. And it's not an indictment for those who are great preachers, but I've just always want to be a great
Mm-hmm.
minister. And man, you have to truly become.
Yeah.
You have to become. That's
I
the
think that's
key. So
awesome. I think that was so
thank you. I'm
good.
sorry. That's my
No, I
rant.
think that's so good. We're going to put a paywall over like the last 6 minutes, and we're going to end the episode there 6 minutes ago. And they're going to have to subscribe, put their emails in, give us some money, and then I'll let them hear what you just said. Like that's going to be a bonus. That's going to be. We're going to totally. I think that's
Here
phenomenal.
you go.
I think that
Well, thank
I keep joking about somebody out there in their Kia Sorrento listening to this as they eat their Chipotle, and they're probably thinking I'm being used the gifts of spirit. But everybody out there, I know you're doing laundry, or you're going getting ready for work tomorrow because you're listening to this at 9 p.m. Or I just want you to pray about it. I want you to be honest with yourself. I want you to let these conversations like this one challenge you, impart something to you. We can always grow. I know the courage. I sound like a motivational speaker. I know that it takes so much courage to believe that you can grow and change. You can. You just got to start. We're all going through seasons of that. The first step is the hardest. I heard someone say recently, there's a reason why the first rung on the ladder is the bottom one. You just got to put one foot on it and you start to climb. And so wake up tomorrow and pray. Or take your lunch break. You can do it. Make that hard phone call. Invest in somebody. God bless you. Thank you for joining us once again. Brother Wilson, thank you for joining us today. God bless you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.